Welcome to Crusade Conversations, an interview series and resource for artists, curators, collectors, and people who care about the beautiful things in their world. I'm Jennifer Schwartz, your host and #1 crusader for art. I own a fine art photography gallery in Atlanta, the Jennifer Schwartz Gallery, and an online photo project called The 10. Crusade Conversations is an initiative of the Crusade for Collecting, a project born out of my passion for supporting art and artists. The Crusade's mission is to cultivate a new crop of art lovers, patrons, and collectors by encouraging people to engage with art in exciting and innovative ways. Welcome, Jonathan Blaustein. Just a little background. Jonathan is an artist, writer, and educator based in Taos, New Mexico. His work focuses on the intersection of economic theory, globalization, commodification, and culture in the 21st century. Say that 3 times fast, or just once.
Can I not?
His most recent project, well, it's not actually your most recent project. The Value of the Dollar is your kind of your launching project, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I think, again, you're from the website. I don't have it in front of me. I think then I referred to mine.
Mine, right.
Current project. I think I was...
Is mine a completed project?
Say again?
Is mine a completed project?
You know, the answer is no. Definitely not. I was on a deadline for a show that was scheduled, so I kind of saw the show as its own entity, and I wanted to get a particular edit and a particular installation for that show, without necessarily calling it done.
Okay,
I might
sure.
shoot, and I have some new pictures that haven't been seen that actually we're going to be launching in Fraction magazine. I guess this is the first time I'm telling anyone that. So I'm going to be showing some pictures beyond what was even in the show.
Oh, that's exciting.
Fall. Thank you. I think it's exciting, too.
Okay, so let's back up.
Sure.
Let's get a little bit of background. Tell me about Value of a Dollar and when did you start that project? How did it come about? And you've had a lot of success with that, but give us a little bit of background of how it started.
Sure. Well, I tend to work, with a background of ideas, every time I begin a project. So with the Value of a Dollar, it was something I began shooting in the beginning of 2008, but I kind of first conceived of it, about 6 months before that. So I like to get an idea in my head, something will kind of pop up from nothing, and then I like to kick it around for a while and really, be patient, try to figure out if it's, kind of worth exploration. Because, when we start something, as artists, it takes a lot of time and energy and commitment. So I try not to be flighty in that respect. So I had the idea for this project based around food, because it's been a really major component of my life for years. I mean, obviously
most people
eats. Right, I know. I was waiting for that. In my head, I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I occasionally eat.
Right, exactly. Right, 3 meals a day. No, I worked in the restaurant industry for over 15 years, and I've been a serious cook for that long. So it was just, starting from some, place of passion. But, the original idea just came from seeing all these, billboards and semi-trucks filled with, artificial versions of, fast food. Big Macs and double cheeseburgers and, these just lacquered artificial objects that bear no resemblance to the food that you get, if you go into a restaurant and give them money.
Right. Right.
And I was just, as a photographer and an image maker, I thought that was really interesting, that there was this disconnect between the, imagery and the object, and everybody knows that, right? I mean, everyone knows that it doesn't look like that. And yet the imagery is so powerful that it really, contributes to this epidemic we have here in the States of diabetes and obesity. So the obvious next question was, well, I know what they say it looks like, but, what would happen if I just went and bought something and slapped it down on my studio table and took some pictures? What would that imagery look like, and how subversive might it be? Mm-hmm. That was kind of the beginning, and I studied conceptual art in graduate school for a year, and I came out with an appreciation for keeping things really simple and clean and digestible, as a process. It makes, because when we use a visual language, you really want people to be able to understand that language. So
right.
Ultimately, I settled on, $1 as just the most perfectly round symbolic number I could come up with, so that all the pictures would, relate to one another directly as a symbolic language. So that's the backstory on how I got there.
It makes me think of, when, like I was born in 1975, and back when, before the internet, you could, I don't know, someone would give you on your birthday, like, in 1975, this was the hit song, and this is how much a gallon of milk was, and then and how much a gallon of gas was, and going to your parents' one and looking that up in some book, and theirs was 5 cents and mine was $1.35, and
back
today
in my day,
right.
You could get a hot dog at Ebbets Field, 3 pennies, 3 pennies, I tell you. So of course probably should have been a Brooklyn Jewish accent, a bad pretend British accent. That doesn't even make sense.
It's all right. I was going with it. I was all in, yeah. And then so $1, and the images are all same background, studio shot, so it really gives you a sense of, it pulls away all of that background information, so that you're really just focusing on the concept, really.
Yeah, well, it decontextualizes things,
right.
And then again, it creates an equivalent. It's not. In retrospect, I kind of understand how the pictures, went, flew as far around the world as they did, just because there's not much to get.
Well, it's a quick read.
Level.
It's a quick
right.
read,
$1,
but it's
I get it,
right.
And then they kind of are able to relate the images to each other. And of course, there's hopefully a lot more meaning than just the surface level. But yeah, there have been very few people who've actually come to my studio, but it's a mess. Like, I have a very messy, not particularly clean studio, and it just so happens that my walls are white, and I have I bought this plastic to put on top of my studio table just because it was like a cutting surface. It was like you could you can recut on it. I never even purchased it with the intention of shooting on it. So the original impetus for the background was just, well, where else would I put it? I'll put it on my table. And I didn't quite know that I was going to be able to get that aesthetic right away. And once it it kind of had this allure of high-end studio photography, but I was using no lighting, no retouching. It kind of helped, I think, people relate to the work, because it doesn't aspire to be anything other than what it is,
Right. And how many images are in that body of work, and when did you feel like you had enough to tell the full story?
That's a good question. Right now I have 28, and I'm probably going to continue, now and again over time, just because I have this opportunity to, check back in and let things age a little bit. But I stopped at 20. Was the original edit that I started to show around, just for the reason that you mentioned. I felt like I had this asymmetric balance of enough different places in the world and enough different ideas, looking at meat and the treatment of animals and processed food and organic and all of that. It just, once I felt like I had a balance that told the story the way I wanted to, then I stopped. And a few years later, I guess in 2010, I had some new ideas, and so, I went back in and took some more pictures. It was, not so calculated, and more just about, if I feel like I can add something, then I'm going to try to add.
Right. And then how, so I want to talk about that project and how you got the exposure and the sales and stuff. But before we do, I want to talk about mine. Sure. So that project, so it's a different concept, but it also has a very similar aesthetic, which I think I love that. I love to look at work and be able to tell who the photographer was, and that it has a recognizable aesthetic. So how much of your decision about what your next project would be and how you would capture it was because of that you were like, okay, I'm known for this work and this look and the way that I told that story. How important was that decision, or how much thought did you put behind it? Okay, whatever my next idea is, I want to tell it in a similar way.
I have to say it's a terrific question, and obviously a multi-layered question. To be totally honest with you, I would have to say, I tried to take all of it into consideration. Once the previous work achieved a certain level of success, there was a project I was shooting like documentary style in the field, and I had it on my website and I was starting to show it around. And once the value of $1 really popped, I actually kind of, I took that work offline and I kind of tucked it away because I didn't feel that it was really mature enough or even innovative enough, to kind of be that next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I thought about it, I did consider those things. You hear, I'm known for my honesty as, in my writing, and I mean, there are a lot of folks who'll tell you it is important to have a recognizable style. And so, I took that into account. But at the same time, I never want to sort of repeat myself or, not push the envelope. So I kind of weighed these things. And ultimately what happened was, mine is about decontextualizing nature, just like the value of a dollar was about decontextualizing food.
Mm-hmm.
I have this property. Basically, I own these natural resources.
Right.
And like a good capitalist, I wanted to try to, commodify that, take advantage of it, because, exploit it. Because, again, it's double-edged. On the one hand, I'm doing, this action that people might consider, kind of reprehensible. But on the other hand, it's like through the art and through the process of the ideas, you're drawing attention to these concepts. Private property is a pretty broad concept that I don't think people think about very often. So once I knew that I wanted to do that I wanted to take this nature and remove it from its own environment, then, the obvious answer was the studio. And so ultimately the question became, do I want to change my studio around, just so that the pictures don't share a common location with the previous project?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I want to keep the location exactly the same, which seems kind of natural, and then have the benefit of letting the ideas build on themselves, having that continuous space where people could connect the two projects together. And of course, that was the decision that I opted for. And I am using strobe, I'm using studio lighting in this project as well. So by changing some of the compositional structures and using artificial light, and of course, sculpting and drawing, which in and of itself is a huge leap from just ready-made objects.
Right. Just letting.
So I've kind of given you the very detailed answer, but yeah, I thought it all through. I think it's important, and I've got an article coming out soon where I kind of even related to that, in the context of a major artist, and I asked the same question. It's okay to carry things through, but at what point is it not? At when does it get old? So I would say, if you see me shooting this way in 10 years, you can probably, punch me in the stomach and say, hey, Blaustein, maybe you want to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really a violent sort, so I'm pretty bold, but, not physical.
Okay.
So, and another question about mine is I have the images in front of me. So I think it's interesting, and I'm curious about your decision to how you were working with scale, because some of the, I love the one of the mouse, and it's so little, and, in the center of the table, and then there's a bushy thing that's
a tumbleweed.
Yeah. Oh, see, I live on the East Coast.
Yeah, you didn't need to know that. And they're not normally red like that. That's part of why the color.
Yeah, that's what threw me.
You don't need to know that. I didn't
Not
know
my
that.
complete lack of desert experience.
Right, a long time to fit in, or at least try. Promise you.
So, how did that play into the way that you are capturing these images?
Well, the answer is that I every time I made something or rearranged something, I really for me, part of why I love making work like this is that, when I'm shooting photographs, I'm shooting actively. I wasn't using a tripod. It's all handheld.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving and I'm kind of engaging and looking, and of course I'm always limited by the sort of minimum focal distance that my camera will focus. But beyond that, it's just a very active process for me. So every picture was different, and every setup I shot multiple ways. So it was kind of it was very free flowing, which is part of how I enjoy it. One of the things that I don't like, when I'm looking at other people's work is I'm not very interested in people who come up with a formula and or a process, and then the creating of the work is an afterthought. Like once you've got your process, then it's like you could be stamping out car parts in Detroit.
Right, you just keep, insert and replace.
You've got your mark, you replace the object on the mark, click. I mean, under those circumstances, I could have shot, the value of $1 in a couple of days. So every artist is different, and I mean, there are people who use that strategy great. I love Terrence Simon's work, and some people do it well, but for me, we're all different. And so I'm...
well, that wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, the looking and the seeing and the engagement with these subjects, especially the dead baby mouse. I mean, that was, of course, the hardest picture to take. But because I'd killed it and I'd killed its whole family, that was kind of like my moral moment. I thought, well, if I can kill it, then I should have the guts to be able to, to look at it,
right.
Fish it out of the field, put it down on the table, and have the guts to just say, all right, you did this, maybe you should, have the guts to really look at what you did.
Right.
So that picture was very personal, obviously.
So going back to Value of a Dollar, so you have this work, and what one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this, have you as part of this podcast series, was that you have work that's traditionally what I would say, well, I would say that it's difficult to sell. It's not the typical type of work that, it's not rainbows and unicorns, as I
right.
love
Definitely
to
not.
say. So, and that's also what's wonderful about it. But how, when you, as an artist, are compelled to make something and to say something, that you feel like you have something important to say, and that the images aren't going to necessarily be something that someone wants to hang over their bed, what you have to be even more innovative, I feel like, from a business perspective, to get your name out, to get that exposure, to get the recognition that the work deserves, because you're not going to be able to, for the most part, go through a traditional gallery route and rely on other people to take it to art fairs and sell it to kind of newer collectors. So, you're very sharp about all of this, and you and I have had conversations about your work in the past along those lines. So how, and I feel like you've been incredibly creative and thoughtful about who and what collections would most appreciate your work and have gone after them and been really successful. So tell me about that. Tell me about that kind of thought process and how you did it. Tell us your secrets, Jonathan Blaustein.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I like to be, strategic and think ahead as much as I can, and yet, as hard as I've worked on all this, a lot of things really did end up being kind of random and fortuitous. In the beginning, I didn't really look at it that way. I kind of felt like because the work was innovative, and original, that was my goal. I kind of feel like, my ambitions, and I hope I, don't come off, arrogant, but I really have set the bar high for how good I want to be as an artist. That's the way I judge myself. What's my potential and how great I can be, and then how can I maximize that potential,
Sure.
I was just telling somebody that yesterday. I think I'm really good, but I don't think I'm great or genius at 38, which means maybe I will be at 48 or 58, So I just want to do the best work I can. So, when the work was being done, I always figured that people would be interested in it. And within the series, there are, grotesque images in both projects, really mine as well. Even though it's new, there are grotesque, hardcore pictures, and then there are really beautiful pictures.
Sure.
So in my mind, I always thought, ultimately people would they be able to cherry pick, couch photos, as it were.
Right.
That my real success would come from whether the work was actually meaningful. And that's what ended up happening. But, how it happened was kind of traditional nowadays. I went to a portfolio review and then did another and just started, meeting people and building community, getting the work out online, which is something I think a lot of aspiring photographers have at their disposal now. There's a way to get your work seen if you're willing to put in the time.
Absolutely.
So that was what I did, and I always encourage people to do it, but then it comes down to, does your work speak to people? So in my case, I was showing it, and I did work with the traditional gallery at one point, but you're right in that they did have a hard time selling pictures, so that didn't, ultimately I parted ways. But with me, it's kind of an old story at this point, but the New York Times agreed to publish the pictures through a portfolio review Santa Fe, and once they did, they went viral. And really it was the sort of global impact and the sort of novelty of that story, I think, the fact that they had been verified to really make an impact, and then some people that I had reached out to in the past, through contacts and through portfolio reviews, actually reached out to me. So I didn't have to. The people that ultimately, really, wanted to invest in it, the state of New Mexico and the Library of Congress, I think it was, my guess is that it was the cultural impact of the work as well.
So did they both approach you?
Yeah, ultimately.
You were just like sitting in your pajamas one day and the Library of Congress calls?
Yeah. Well, of course you're right. It's never that simple. I met Verna Curtis, the curator with whom I dealt at Review Santa Fe. Again, it was a portfolio review. She saw the work.
Here's the take-home message. Go to Review Santa Fe.
Right, go to Review Santa Fe. Well, I know I sometimes sound like an ad for them, but it happened to have happened that way, But, she said, I would love to get this work. I don't know if we can afford it. Follow up with me in 4 months. So, of course, I did. And, but ultimately, the emails did come in one day out of the blue that said, we would like to buy this. So that was pretty rad. And then Fidelity Investments, they got a hold of me. I didn't know them at all. It came in through an email. And, for them, it was a perfect fit. They were opening a new building south of Albuquerque, and, there's a financial connection. But they did. They cherry-picked the beautiful pictures. They were the first investor who did what I always thought, which was if you only take the pretty ones, it'll make a gorgeous suite, without having to make people look at potted meat or, jigsawed cow leg like the beef shank. So
no, I mean I love potted meat.
Well, okay, we can talk after the podcast, and I'll give you the special bro deal. How about that?
Yeah, I think
you want the potted meat picture, we can make it happen.
I think that's the one that will match my throw pillows.
I would love to see that. How about that? I want to see the installation shot. Can you do that for me, Jennifer? And when we're done, when it's all said and done,
that's how I got
a picture of pink potted meat, because that's chickens and pigs and cows all mushed together in one little gooey.
I'm gonna look at it again right now. Oh.
No, I don't think you want that over your couch.
I don't know.
All right. Well, anyway.
That's how I ended up getting Michael Greco's The Tender Lover photograph in a gigantic, amazing size. He's like, I'll give you The Tender Lover in the biggest size that I have it, but you have to hang it in your house. I'm like, done. And my husband's like, is this a sex toy machine? I'm like, that's right. Over the couch.
Okay, now I'm going to have to go online afterwards. I'm fantastically curious. But if I were going to synopsize, it was incremental things, and and some of it was you just never know. I mean, I'm convinced that had the pictures been published on a different day or a different month, it might never have happened. I mean, there's an element of happenstance. I think when we work hard enough and push ourselves, we can kind of get in a position where at least good things might happen.
Absolutely. And, when you said before, like, you don't want to sound arrogant by saying that you want to be the best, that you can be and you want to really make a difference. I mean, why aim to be mediocre? Why aim to be passable? So, I mean, and I think that it's, we should all be doing that. And I think it's a great thing to have this online photo community because you can see other people's work, and that can help push you even more as opposed to just sort of being in a vacuum in your own community. And
absolutely. It's a great point. I never, ever would have been able to be based where I am, living in a horse pasture, outside of Taos, if I didn't have access to the outside world in that way. I mean, it all started for me, the success started, it was totally, there was a correlation to when I started, connecting to the blogosphere and paying attention and looking into what was going on. I think it was massively important. I didn't even really figure things out until the beginning of 2009, start to figure out, start reading and checking up on what other people were doing. And it's been a huge influence in a good way. I mean, sometimes in a bad way. I think there can be a downside to getting a little too caught up in other people's business and other people's success, So I try not to get jealous.
And then tell me about A Photo Editor. How long have you been writing for them, and how did that come about?
We're not quite at 2.5 years yet. I think it was 2 years at the beginning of June, so
okay.
Not quite. Depending on who's listening to this and what people can glean, I have to treat this as a lesson because it just was. Like, I was a regular reader of the blog. Like I said, I tuned into the blogosphere in 2009, and so by then I was really familiar with Rob's vision and, what he offers to the world.
Sure.
He's just giving people tons of really valuable information that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. And so one day, it might have been one of the only times he ever did it, but he put out a call for images. There was a little post that said, I know an editor who's looking for pictures of the economy. Something that
you're like, I know a guy.
Right. And I had some pictures, and I sent him in, and he wrote right back and said, I like these, thanks. Because Rob, he's like that. He gets back to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that happened, the week before I was supposed to go to Review Santa Fe and then this festival in Virginia called Look Between. And because I was a regular reader, I knew that he occasionally published stories from, other people. And I had been blogging with some friends here in New Mexico, Melanie McWhorter and David Ondrick, so I had some practice, and I just said to him, hey, I'm going to these events. Would you be interested in me sending you stories like man on the scene? And he said yes. And it was that simple. I just kind of took a chance and put myself out there. And then he liked what I did, and, within a few months, there was another story, and then he offered to send me to New York, and, it just kind of, I think it was mutually beneficial, and we work really well together. So then I guess by last summer, he just put me on staff, and now I write every week, and I've been doing a weekly column for, almost a year. So it started from that. I try to encourage people whenever possible to, stick yourself out there. I mean, the worst thing somebody can say typically is no, or you suck, or maybe they'll ignore you, but, sometimes you have to take a chance. So I never, ever, would have said, hey, I want to go be a blogger, or I want to write for this amazing website. It was more, that one random opportunity, and then I tried to pounce.
Well, and I think it's nice, too, as someone who has a blog, or too many, but doing this, the Crusade for Collecting site, and writing, trying to write regularly for it and kind of push out new ideas that people are doing, and just kind of highlighting innovation in bringing new audiences to art. It would, I'd love somebody else to be able to help, the pay kind of sucks, but hey, I'm really awesome to work for
right.
or work with.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I started writing for free, and then, once you start getting paid, then of course you never want to go back.
Right.
Free, and it's been really, but
But it's nice to go on that blog and that there are different voices. Oh,
yeah. I think so too. It's everyone. There's so many people out there saying things that I think it's great that there can be a few core places where people can trust the editorial vision and things like that.
Absolutely.
And yet at the same time, there's this almost pop-up feel where isn't that your style? You get
that's
when I'm
right.
told, you get an idea, and then you're 7 miles down the road within a couple days. It's like
where'd you hear that? I'm 7 miles down the road in a 77 Volkswagen bus.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I can't wait to see that. By the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how impressed I am that you're given the limited time we all have, to stick your neck out to try to get other people to engage with art. Whether buying prints or going to museums or really just living, bringing culture into their lives. I think that's pretty fantastic. Very impressive.
Thank you. It's a big goal and crushing feeling at times. So I was talking yesterday with Michael David Murphy, who's the he's the assistant director of Atlanta Celebrates Photography, and I was telling him, kind of updating him on how things are going with my tour planning, and he was like, come on, where's that energy? And I was like, crusading is exhausting. And he's like, you need to be like Joan of Arc. And I was like, I don't want to get burned alive, if that's
okay. Right? Am I wrong here?
Right. She didn't turn out so great.
Right. Yeah. There's only, the diapers don't change themselves. The dinner doesn't cook itself.
True.
And you're talking, and we don't even have takeout. It doesn't, there's no delivery where I live, so.
Oh, that wouldn't work for me.
No, it's tragic. It's true. If I could change anything, it would be that I could have food delivered to my house and still live in the boonies, but, we can't have it all.
So tell me, we have maybe a minute left. So your biggest project is on its way in like a week? talking about changing diapers?
Yes, it's true. That's why it came up. Yes, my wife and I are about to have our second child. We're expecting a daughter any minute now. So it's wonderful of you to distract me from the underlying anxiety. I think that's before the tape ran. I was telling you it's really hard to stay calm.
Yeah.
You know that your life is about to turn upside down any second now. And you can't predict the minute. You just know that it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm not...
Baby Amelie is on her way. And I'll try to take some of the stress energy and channel it into art for the betterment of all mankind, right?
Yeah. I hear that. I have 3 kids, and it's awesome when they get there. The anxiety of when they're coming. I don't do that very well. I'm a planner.
Right. Well, when we get off, once we can follow up in the future, and you can tell me, give me a little advice on how to juggle it all, because from the outside you appear to be doing it really well.
Well, my advice to all of the 10 people that will be listening now to this podcast is that the thing that I tell myself pretty much daily in terms of child rearing is that there are plenty of people with a lot fewer advanced degrees than my husband and I have combined that have done this successfully, that have raised children and they survived. So when the baby's crying in the middle of the night and you're freaking out, you have to just take a step back and think, there are a lot of people living on the streets that are handling this, and I can probably do it.
That's the key, right? You have to keep perspective.
Right. And you know what? The perspective is easier to keep with the second. With the first, you kind of are like, this is the time the baby's not going to stop crying.
Right.
And then,
Another conversation for a different day.
Yes,
we had a rough go the first time, but my son is the coolest guy on earth as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so. Then this baby will be easy. Piece of cake.
Thank you. And I do want to say thank you so much for thinking of me. It's really a pleasure to get to have this conversation, and if anyone benefits from it, that'll be pretty rad too.
Yeah, so here's to many more to come. And thank you. And keep us posted. I'll be on Baby Watch.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Ciao.
Okay, bye.